Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Hello, this is Cisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations podcast, the Elders Edition. I want to welcome everyone back to this week's episode. Before we get started, I want you to sit back and close your eyes and think about our ancestors. You know, I want you to think about face the east, and I want you to think about the men in your life. All the men, you know, our grandfathers, our dads, our sons, our brothers, our homies, the youngsters we might work with. We want to think about them, you know, all the things that they bring, all the things that they go through, bad or good. We want their spirit to be here in a good way as we turn to the West. And all the spectrum of our relatives in between, we want to think of the women. We want to think of the women, all the things that they bring, our grandmothers, our moms, our daughters, our friends, our aunties, all the things that they bring to us, you know. We want to make sure we bring them into this room and support all the things that they share with us, the way they laugh, the way they talk. We want to bring their spirit into the room with us. And then we turn around and we face the north, the direction of our ancestors, our elderly. We want to think about them, all that they bring, all the journey, all the things they took for us. I want to remember them in a good way and that we could be there for them. Some are lonely. Some are full of the same stories. May we listen intently and hear those lessons. And then we turn to the South and the spectrum of all the ages in between. We get to the South, to future generations, to our children, that life be better for them as we do things in their honor, that we remember their spirits, their laughter, the way they question everything, that somehow, some way we can be inquisitive like that and bring their spirit into the room, and all those that are coming behind them, that we're prepared for them and we're making the world a little bit better. And of course, we want to thank the sun, the light in our lives, our star, and all the other stars within the universe. And we go to the earth, to Tonantzin. We thank her for all she's given us, all the animals that crawl, that walk, that run, that do all the things for us. You know, we want to think about that water as well, and all the elements that we use here on Tonantzin. And of course, we want to think of the Creator, the center, those that, you know, the great mystery, the things that we do not know, but we want to call that in too, as we prepare to have a conversation about what healing looks like, what healing is, and we continue to grow. I hope. This week, we have a special guest, a fellow Yelder, a good bro of mine, a carnal, a homie, Mario Ozuna-Sanchez from the NCN. He's been with NCN for many years, and he has a very unique story. But I want to welcome him in, and if you could just introduce yourself, bro.
All right. Saludos to everybody. Mario Ozuna-Sanchez para servirles, to be of service. I'm very honored that I get to be a part of this beautiful podcast that's been offering so much great wisdom and teaching and medicine to people across the world from what we hear now. I am the son of Margarita and Gabino Ozuna-Sanchez. I'm their fourth child of 5 that they had. I am the husband to Blasa Barons Ozuna, who I've been married to for 18 years, and the father to Miguel, Ileana, and AB, my beautiful children, and grandfather to Juliana Marie. Very honored to be here as a part of this Yelder section of the podcast, and excited for the conversation we have in store.
All right, thank you so much. Just a clarification, I want everybody stop what you're doing and subscribe to Healing Generations podcast so you could continue to get it. It's on every Tuesday. We have a new episode. And you could go to your podcasting app of choice, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, all the different platforms, and subscribe and write a review. Let people know about who we are. This way, more people can get onto the movement of healing. And we have 4 kind of episodes. We have one that feature the elders, healing practitioners with Jerry Dale. Then we have the maestras talking about the mujeres work, talking about the contributions that women provide in our community, the great healing work they've done, their voice, lifting up their voice. We have the elders edition where we talk about we're not quite elders yet, but we're elders in training. Therefore, we use the term elders, and that's both men and women. You know, we're in this unique. I want to say middle age, but it's kind of like that. We're in the middle of, we're not quite so young, but we're not quite that old yet. We're still in the middle, just grinding away. And then we have the youth, and the youth do their beautiful podcasts, lifting up youth voices, talking about their healing journey, because they truly are our next leaders, and we have to do what we can to support them and grow. So I just want to stop you right there and have you do that if you can. So, Mario, as we go on, I'm going to ask you a series of questions, just about your life, things that you've done. But can you share a little bit more about yourself, your family, your background, and your journey in life up to this point?
Sure. So I'm really privileged and blessed that when I think about my life and I think about my families and all the connections that have supported me to be the person I am today, I really do sit on the shoulders not only of my parents and my abuelitos, but really strong ancestors that originally come from. My roots are in the Mexico area of Sinaloa, where my indigenous ancestors are of Yaqui and Mayo descent. My abuelitos all migrated from Sinaloa to Mexicali, right on the border of Mexico and the United States, desert people. And that's where my parents were born and raised. My 2 older brothers were born there as well. And then then my family from there transitioned to Los Angeles, where the rest of us were born. The 3 of us were born there in Boyle Heights in the General Hospital, and then raised in East Los Angeles all our lives. So, like my story is a very typical story. I think I always say it's a typical East LA story. We have a lot of beautiful resiliency in our story, but we also have a lot of unfortunate trauma and pain that's intergenerational, and because of that, a lot of unfortunate choices and realities were created within our homes. For myself, I just quickly say, I love being my mom's son. My mom Margarita is a strong, beautiful mother who really taught us resiliency and taught us unconditional love. And I love being the brother to Gabriel, Juan, and Victor, and to my younger sister Arcelia. But within all that, there is a lot of pain that we grew up with. There is a lot of unfortunate violence that we grew up with, and a lot of that was perpetuated through my dad. Because of that, a lot of decisions that carried forward weren't the healthiest decisions, and were decisions that were meant to survive above anything, but unfortunately had very negative consequences. So I ended up on the streets with my brothers. I always say, followed their path. Was very lost for a very long time as a kid. And when I was 14 years old, I found out I was going to be a dad. And 2 months into my 15th birthday, my son was born. I was joking around a little right now. This year I celebrated my 28th dad anniversary. My son's 28 years old now. And it's important that I always leave with my story sharing about being a father, because that's really where my life began, and where I made a conscious decision to want to understand. I had teachings that might have been rooted in trauma, but that I also wanted to give my son a life that was based on blessing. And as a young father, I made choices. I was able to be supported in those choices by my mom to finish my education, and then also made choices to give back to people the way people gave to me, and started doing community work as a teenager. And then when I transitioned to San Jose in the Bay Area, I was able to be a part of San Jose State University, but also do community work. And I've been doing community work all my life. That's really where I rooted myself and have found a great sense of purpose. And I was really lucky that within those earlier years, when I was around 19, 20 years old, I met Jerry Teo, our elder maestro, and I was trained on Jove Noble, and I met the Compadres Network. I was introduced to circle process, was introduced to cultural teachings, and from there really dedicated myself to being a student of that and really being somebody that could reflect all the medicine I was receiving back to other kids and back to other young men, young fathers, and back to men as a whole. So a lot of my work has been focused around doing what people would look at as prevention and intervention work, but really to just hold a space for people where they could feel like they have a reflection of healing, have a reflection of values that honor them, have a reflection that's non-judgmental, and that they're able to connect to all their aspects of health, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and also have a sense of connection to their ancestors and to teachings that are already within them. So that's a little bit about what brings me to where I'm at today. Officially, I will say I'm the senior manager of training and capacity building for the Compadres Network, which just means I get to use all my experience to support the team and then support people across the country.
It sounds like you've been through a lot. So let's dig a little deeper. What are the lessons that you have learned from your culture, your family, or your life experience along the way that helped you in your own healing and development?
You know, I was really reflecting earlier today in preparation for this, understanding that even from a young age, there was a lot I experienced, there was a lot I witnessed, there was a lot that I saw in my home that even though in many ways it was a norm for us, in my spirit and in my heart, I just always knew wasn't right. Seeing men be violent to women physically, seeing abuse of alcohol and drugs, seeing how in my house the reality I was experiencing didn't match up to what we were being told on TV was supposed to be a normal home, a normal household, and not feeling comfortable with the confusion that you kind of get from growing up like that, right? You know, when you're watching television and you're watching a TV series where the dad and the mom are working together, where the dad even has a job, you know, that was very different for me because my dad didn't have a job. My dad, he couldn't maintain a job because, unfortunately, because of his addictions, because of his incarceration, because of his desire to not do that, to not work. There was a lot of confusion from a very young age that sometimes was very motivating to want to do the opposite, and sometimes was very motive. It really took all motivation away from you of knowing what to do. You know, I mentioned to someone a little earlier that my safe space was the library. There was a library up the street from where I grew up in East LA, Anthony Quinn Library, where I would go. And I was lucky that the librarian understood my home because they were a neighbor of mine. And they kept a space put aside for me where they would always put books for me to read. Reading to me was a way of kind of escaping the world, the magic of the stories. It was always something that when I couldn't find any direction at home, find any connections at home, I would get lost in the books. But that also kind of enhanced the confusion a little bit because, again, once you come back to reality, you know, the cycles that continue to play in my house and continue to play in our experiences were just really hard in terms of, you know, just never feeling safe. And at home, that was a lot of what I felt, never safe. I never felt safe at home, at school. I never felt safe, you know, on the streets. But then there came a point in time that because of the way I saw people react in my house, and by saying people, I'm going to say men, the mindset was, well, if there's not going to be a sense of safety, then at least control the madness. And that meant that you control it by being the predator versus the prey. You know, I grew up in a home where people were very much having the mindset that I'm gonna hurt you before you hurt me, and even the way sometimes they acted out love was based on hurt. I know what it's like to see my dad hit my mom and blaming her because she couldn't accept his love, and that's how he was reinforcing it was with his fist. So these different things I saw and felt, it was kind of tough, especially because there was no space to even check in or talk about that because we very much grew up in that type of environment where what happens at home stays at home. But even at home, no one talks about it, right? So like you could have a situation where one of my brothers tries to commit suicide and is taken away by an ambulance because he OD'd on pills. And we have the ambulance and the fire department all up in our house, and they're questioning where did he get the pills from? They're questioning to arrest people. I mean, they're supposed to be there to help, but there's like all this madness happening around you, and you're just being moved from section of the house to section of the house to just not get in the way. And then you're expected to sleep that night like it was a normal night. And then the next day, it's retold to you, don't you dare talk about what happened in the house. And you're just left to hold all that. And that's a lot of pressure for a kid. That's a lot of pressure for a kid. Um, so based on these experiences, I really did have a mindset of leaving, of not wanting to be in the house, or if I was in the house, disappearing. I try to find ways of reaching out, but I don't think anybody knew how to connect because of all the confusion. So instead of trying to connect with each other, we all went our own ways. So it was very lonely in some ways, to grow up like that. It was very lonely to feel like, dang, like no one even knows what's happening in my house. Like, is this like everybody's house must be perfect, but look at the way my house is. And then being ashamed of it, being ashamed of like being raised on welfare, not having money, not having resources. And then to top it off, in my home or within my family, we were the black sheep of the family because we were Gavino's kids. And my parents' situation is the good girl married the bad guy. And when we would go to Mexico to visit our family, we'd be reminded of that in indirect ways. A lot of microaggressions, right? When you think about it now. And that never also helped you feel like you were in any way valued, even within your family. So that constant wanting to fit in, but not knowing where to fit in was just a really hard thing. So then within all that, now I'm a dad and I have the responsibility of, as a young age, what was I going to do and give to my kid? And the one thing I'll say to kind of close this up in a sense is because it's kind of been my reality since I was 15, so almost 28 years of trying to figure out how to give to him what I never felt I received from the men in my life. That really pushed me on a journey of self-discovery, of wanting to be something of value to him because he meant so much to me. I always say, and now it gets thrown in my face sometimes, but I always say my son was my resurrection because he was born on Easter Sunday and his first breath was my first breath of life. And he joked around with me about that this year when it was his birthday. And I'm like, and he doesn't, and it's true, like the way he's like, well, Dad, you need to do this for me because I'm the reason for living. And but it's the truth. It is the truth of, I think I've been spending the last 28 years trying to figure out how to be the best person possible to be the best dad. And still on that journey of knowing and embracing all that I am, because as much as I would want to sit here as we're engaging this conversation and say I'm like this perfect teacher, this perfect maestro or whatever, my hardest and best teachings come from my biggest mistakes, from the biggest pill to swallow. And I don't judge myself for that anymore. And I really understand that I have to embrace the ugly of healing in order to live the beauty of it. And I'm lucky that I have people that have really taught me that and reflected that, and that in this journey that I'm always evolving with it. And that's why I'm very connected to these ways. These ways have taught me how to be a man, taught me how to strive to be a good partner, how to be connected to my ancestors, how to acknowledge the value I have because of them and because of my experiences, and hopefully how to reflect that to other people so that they can see their own beauty and their own worth. So that's what brings me to. I mean, there's obviously deeper levels within my life experiences. I'm very thankful that I have men and women that have taught me a lot, have shown me a lot. Because the one thing I will say is that the hardest part about this was it's easy to know what not to do because I've had examples of a lot of things I should never do. But it was really hard to do the right thing when I didn't have those examples. And I didn't get those examples until I got connected to these ways and to the Compadres Network and to these traditions.
Man, it sounds like a a definite journey that a lot of men go through, but not are all resilient. Especially during the '90s, where it seems like babies were having babies. There were so many people that were being fathers and mothers at that time and really struggling. But one thing I know about you, and just, if anybody's ever met you, knows that cultura is important, that spirituality is important. What were the first few things that kind of caught your eye when it came to that, and really getting on that journey? Because sometimes I feel like some of the newer generation, like they almost take it for granted. Like for me, I had to fight for it. I remember just chopping wood and doing all this work just to have a chance to sit in there. It felt like, they were my elders at that point, because they had a rough go when they first got involved. They were in the midst of the movement. They didn't have they were trying to figure things out, about getting more involved in the university, getting involved in school and the community. And this was a lifeline in many ways for our elders, But what was your journey in that? And what were the things that really you gravitated to and that are still a big part of your life?
When I think about my life as a participant, I just knew I wanted acceptance. As a little kid, I wanted to just feel like I wasn't only present, but that I belonged. And then when I started becoming a student, I really was conscious of questioning what was around me, questioning to find a sense of value in me, and then also questioning just to want to learn and grow. And so, when I was talking earlier about the reading part, it was really beautiful to start getting connected to the stories of different people, the stories of communities, the stories that talked about movements. And at first, I thought it only existed for me in a literary way, right? Just through books. But then understanding that even our people had those stories was really dope. And starting to learn about the Chicano movement, taking the concept of calling myself Chicano because I was a homeboy versus actually knowing that it was a political movement. It was a movement of identity, of rediscovery. But again, then understanding that it was more because of what I was reading and because of what I was being told as something nostalgic versus understanding that it still existed very much. And actually, not to take away from other areas, but that in many ways I was living and growing up in one of the center points for the Chicano movement, in East LA. I went to high school where the blowouts started, and you heard about these things. But then one of the things that happened for me was understanding that it's the movement has never died. The movement existed. So there was this political consciousness that was starting to grow in me as young as in high school. But really what I was searching for, and I want to be really upfront, was I just wanted to belong. I wanted to feel that I was enough.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started learning about what our people were able to offer, what our people were able to do, and then I got connected to Maestro Jerry, and and having him welcome us into these ways where it wasn't just going to teach us how to be men, but how to be connected to our cultural values and our cultural traditions. And things just kind of, I think maybe because at that point as I was ready to be a student in another way, the teachers just started coming to me from many directions where a lot of the practical knowledge that they were bringing, because it just made so much sense. It was being presented to me in a way of how do you live it now? Like that what existed before is still, there's a continuum of it now. And to be very real, it was really cool to meet people that I had read about.
Oh yeah,
Like that was
definitely.
like mind blowing, right? Like it was
Mm-hmm.
like, man, that really happened, and these are the people that are still making it happen. So the elders that were being presented to me, the teachers that were coming to me, were really big about how is it. They didn't talk about it like back in the day. They talked about it how it still was necessary today. So that connection really motivated me to want to be connected to them and to what the work was. It gave me a sense of pride to understand that even within our movements, there was so many levels to it, that our people participated in so many things that they were never given credit for. I found a new reason to want to belong. I found a new reason to want to validate myself in being conscious to also offer something of like put in work, in other words. And I have to be real, to take a quick step back. I'm the youngest of four. So when you're a young When you're a sibling and you're the youngster, your whole life is proving yourself. Like that's all it is. So having to prove myself and earn my role was not anything new. And unfortunately, the way we understand it, the way our elders tell the story, our people have always had to prove themselves and have always fought for their place at the table. So when I was understanding that, and because of how I was raised, I was never shy about doing what I had to do to put in work. That much my mom always taught me, that is, when you put all your energy into something, you take a bigger sense of pride within it. And that's how I looked at the movement. That's how I looked at community work. I also very much understood, maybe because of the values of how I was raised, that I didn't owe anybody anything, but I should be thankful for what people have done.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I met people that really went through hardships, sometimes worse than whatever I could have imagined, and still did what they had to do to step up for people, that just blew me away. Like it gave me such a motivation to want to do that and to offer of myself. So within the movement, within all that, I started really learning, and then there was also this other part of me, because I don't want to romanticize any of this. There was another part of me that finally was really happy to see men want to invest in me in a healthy way. Like the fact that these men were taking me in as a mentee, were taking me in as a student, were taking me in to teach me. My dad never did those things. I'm the youngest of four, as I've said, and my dad by trade is technically a mechanic. And when he tried to teach me how to work on cars, I didn't want to learn from him because it was a violent reality. Like, okay, I'm
Oh
sorry, I
yeah.
didn't know the difference between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I deserve to get hit for that. And that
Mm-hmm.
was how my dad would teach. So there wasn't a lot he could offer me at that point. But these men were teaching me with love, with unconditional love, with compassion. They were very strict, very, very strict because of how they were taught. But I was okay with that. Well, one, because I'm a knucklehead and I didn't have a lot of discipline, and the strictness taught me discipline. But two, I was also understanding that not only I didn't feel like they were taking it out on me because of how they were taught. I felt more like I deserved to put in work because of their sacrifice. Like I had to honor their sacrifice. With all these men and women, these Chicano, indigenous elders and teachers, whatever they suffered for in order to give me the teachings, then I needed to respect that, and I needed to put in work to be worthy of it. And at the end of the day, what it also did was it rooted me in a way to be more hungry to learn more. It rooted me in a way to own this movement as mine as well, not just theirs. And it gave me a different way of living my purpose. So I'm very thankful for the generation before us and the generation even before them who were intentional. I would say that we're like the third generation of intentionally living these ways. But then there's also generations before that just this was their way of life, and they couldn't be upfront about it. They had to be quiet about it. They had to sacrifice. I mean, they could have, to keep it real, if people don't even know, they could have got killed for honoring our traditions and for organizing our people. So their life was on the line for just trying to always live with hope and trying to live with a sense of rooted connection. So when I think about all these things, I feel like I have a responsibility to honor that and to pass it on. So for me as a elder or young elder in training, I think a lot of that leads my passion, and I'm very passionate if you know me. I guess sometimes to a fault because I'm kind of hardcore. But part of what's made me hardcore in this is that I'm also good at this. And I don't mean I'm not saying I'm better than other people. I'm just saying this way of life is easy for me because it's 100% a part of me. So that motivates me to want to do it more. And I mean, it was the same thing as a kid. I wasn't physically athletic, but because of my passion and because of my commitment, I was able to be good at football. So when I'm good at something, I throw myself all into it, because it helps motivate me to want to be better and better. But the good thing about the movement and about community work and about honoring relationships is the better you are at it, the more you help others be just as good at it. And really, at the end of the day, it's understanding that the biggest thing I could do to feel like I belong is to really look at myself and love myself, because I'm worthy of it. I carry something to offer to this world and to myself. And that also that's connected to the dream that somebody had hundreds of years ago and continued that dream within our ancestors to have a better life for tomorrow. That's why all of this is really important to me, and I really value this way. And I do feel, and I don't, I just want to be clear about one thing. I'm, and I know you agree with me on this. I understand that when I now took the responsibility to go from being a student to a teacher, I wasn't going to teach necessarily the way I was taught.
Yes.
So, and I don't think as a teacher you should. I think each generation needs to teach better. Just like I see people that I've mentored and that I've taught, and I see the easiness that they have in teaching others. I love it because I feel like whatever I offered them, they took it to another level. And that's just the chain link of all this beautiful medicine and teaching that has continued. But when I was, and as I am responsible for teaching people, I mean, I'm still a disciplinarian in the sense of you have to really be a student of this. And I still, in some ways, would be a little bit more traditional of like this isn't a joke. You got to take it serious, and you really got to be ready to know what it is, the responsibility you carry with it. But I rather offer the teaching with compassion and love versus from pain.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, something that I'm thankful to my elders that they sustained that pain to pass on the teaching, but they also rooted it so strongly in me that I don't feel I need to pass it on with pain. And I think right now that's where I'm learning in my life as a teacher. How do I do that? And how do I prepare myself for one day to be the teacher of teachers?
So tell me now what you're doing with yourself and others to build on those life lessons about healing, about the movement. How are you putting those skills to work?
So, being a nonprofit worker from a very young age, there was a lot I experienced that really supported me where I'm at today. Back then, there was definitely this mindset of baptism by fire. So, when you started doing community work, there wasn't a training process, there wasn't people supporting you to let you shadow them. It was legitimately get in there, get in where you fit in, and make something happen. And man, that was really hard. It was really hard. But the gift I have of that experience is I learned from a lot of mistakes what to do and what not to do. And then I also really had it in my mind, even at a young age, what would I have wanted in order to be a better worker? I knew how to work hard. My mom instilled that in me. Like, I'm a very hard worker. I have no issue being the first one to show up and the last one to leave. I have no issue finishing something to the end. That's what my mom taught me, and my grandfather taught me that too, my Tata Miguel. But in the community work, there was a lot of unfortunate, unnecessary teachings that were pushed on that when I had to take the responsibility of being a manager or being a coordinator, and then really working with people younger than me or people my age that were new to the work, I didn't feel like they needed to learn through, like they would say in Spanish, through el golpe, through the. I didn't have to batter them for them to learn.
Mm.
I wanted them to learn in a way that, yeah, maybe for some people I'm skipping steps the way I'm teaching them, but I feel if you could still teach them to have a sense of reverence and a sense of understanding and value, but teaching them with compassion, explaining to them what the impact was for me. When we were youngsters, Cisco, we people would take us to ceremonies
Mm-hmm.
and they would scold us before we even did anything. And their mindset was, you represent me, so you better represent me right, and you better blah 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 blah. I'm not gonna lie, I did that in my earlier years of ceremony of taking people. But more importantly, I felt it was to be able to talk to a youngster and say, this gift I'm about to give you was something that was gifted to me and I hold very sacred in my heart. And I want you to be able to love it and hold on to it no differently than me. And whether you're ready for it right now or not, I make a commitment that as much and as ready as you are to receive it, I'm here to walk with you through that process. And there will be moments where we'll walk hand in hand, and there will be moments where we're not going to see each other for a while. But the moment you need it from me, even if it's just a reassurance that this is yours and that you have every right to love it and live it to the fullest of its capacity, that's my role here in helping you. So that's how I've kind of taught. I feel I try to be as a teacher, and there's a lot of mentees I've had and a lot of people I've worked with that hopefully will say that's how I taught them. And at the same time, I'm a papa bear. And sometimes I'm not gonna lie, like I'm a little bit of a, well, come here because I need to chin check you. The only difference is I don't physically do that. I give you a hug and I'm like, come on, man, like you should know better. You deserve more. And my kids would probably say that, right? Because they would probably say, he's more of the papa bear than the gentle giant. But I understand the balance of both of those things because, we were told that back in the days in the 80s and in the 70s and 80s, some of our ceremonial elders would drive around in trucks and they would tell the youngsters, get in the truck. And then they would take them to a sweat lodge and ceremony. And they've never even participated. And they don't even know what they're going to, and it was like kidnapping these kids to get them to do right. And I understand and thank them for what they did. I just know for me, because of the value I place in this way of life and the value I place behind what this could offer, I want to just be a reflection to them and an honest reflection too. A reflection that doesn't romanticize, that doesn't present a picture that isn't balanced. Because I'm very quick to explain to anybody who I'm connected to that these teachings and being a service to the community is a beautiful way of life, but it's a very hard way of life. Just because you're doing the right thing doesn't mean the right thing's always going to happen, and doesn't mean you're not going to mess up. Like you have to
Definitely.
learn and be ready to understand your mistakes as much as you could understand the blessings that you have to offer. So that's how I try to work with the next generation.
I feel like that's such a good perspective about being a good teacher, about being that good maestro. You know what I mean? I think that's what I try to do too. So with that, what counsel or advice would you give others in terms of their own health and healing? Maybe they're not connected to the ways yet, because a lot of young people I meet, they're really looking for something and hold out for that. When you're young, you think if I just had that, then everything would be all right. But what advice would you give?
I feel a lot of what we're doing here is beautiful advice for the next generation, but I'm going to respectfully ask that let me actually focus it on our generation and our elders.
Yes.
Because what I've learned is that this is always going to be a development process for us. Because I'm the teacher now doesn't make me not be a student anymore. Actually, it's the moments where I feel like I know it all and my ego's gotten so big that either I make my biggest mistakes or I get something to remind me that no, you have another level of learning to go through. And what would be important for us, I believe, is to not only have this mindset of rites of passage for youth, but have a continual mindset of rites of passage for every stage of life. So if you're going to call me a yelder, what does that mean? What's my process in this role to know what my steps are to measure my growth, know what way I need to be able to check myself on areas that I'm not doing as good as I should? And then in the community sense, how is it that we create a process and a ceremony, just like we have for going from childhood to adolescence, adolescence to adulthood? What's the process we're going to create for us as elders so that when the community is ready to say, you're going to be an elder now, not when I'm going to say I'm an elder, but the community says we're ready, you're ready, we're tapping you on the shoulders and you got to carry this role now, that there's a ceremony that prepares me for that, that celebrates me for that, and reminds me of my continual responsibility of learning and growing and healing in that. So I believe strongly that we need to not lose track of that opportunity right now because we are losing a lot of elders. And I believe there's always this intergenerational strife of not knowing how to pass on the baton in a healthy way. Instead of being frustrated, let's use this current opportunity to develop that, to grow it out longer. Because the youngsters, it's not about what we need them to do, it's about how we're ready to receive them and how we're ready to honor them in what our new role is. So that's what I would say about that.
That is so beautiful, bro, the way you put that, because I'm approaching those ages myself here soon. You know, being 49, I'm approaching getting there quicker than I like. But at the same time, I always think, am I ready? How am I going to know that? So I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for today, sharing a little bit of yourself with us, and your process. And hopefully that sparks something in the community in various stages that they think about those things. Hey, bro, I just want to say Tlaso again. Thank you for all your hard work. I want to thank all our listeners, all the contributors that make this podcast possible. I want to take the time to remind you, if you like our content, you want to support the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe, write a review, helps people find us. Also, please visit the nationalcompadresnetwork.org and our partners in this work, the brotherhoodofelders.net. Many blessings to each and every one of you. Palabra.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.